going to begin our discussion on joints. So remember that my notes are the summary of the outcomes and as well as the lectures. Your textbook is a rich resource, so don't forget to refer to it and go to it for different examples. That's a better way to say that. So sort of the skeletal system is divided kind of in three areas: skeletal tissue. That's when we talked about compact bone versus cancellous bone. Then we talked about the actual bones themselves. And this is a good point where I will draw your attention to outcome number 15 on your course outline. I did not go through that, locate and describe. If you go to the Evolve website, there's a coloring book, electronic coloring book on there. That's self-directed learning because you just have to identify the bones. So go to the Evolve website. I put instructions. There'll be instructions on your in your announcements of how to get there. If you need help, go to myself or your instructor and we'll help you get there. But it's really a great resource because you just click on it and color the bones. Based on what you're looking for. So that piece there, number 15, is your own work and it's self-directed. So a little bit of extra work there for yourself to do. So don't forget to do that because that will be that is part of the outcomes. Okay, so define a joint. Okay, so a joint is where two bones come together, a union of two bones. We also will call it most frequently an articulation. So as I said, joints form articulations, and the reason for that is our skeleton is made up of several bones, and they need to be held together so that they can make the levers that they need to be. And we also need to have joints there so that the rigid skeleton can bend. I mean, if you couldn't bend your elbow, you wouldn't get food into your mouth. And they increase our range of motion. That's something I probably should mention. ROM is short for range of motion. There are several types, and again, your textbooks, fibrous or immovable, and sometimes textbooks call them synarthrosis. This is an example where we do not see any movement. So the sutures in your skull is another example, as well as how your teeth are embedded into your skull. Cartilaginous or amphiarthrosis, sometimes called that, or slightly movable. Oh, spelling that wrong. And this is where there's a cartilaginous disc. So we looked at the pelvis in our last set of slides, and there was a cartilaginous disc there holding the pelvic bones together at the front in the symphysis pubis area, as well as in the posterior where your iliac part of your coxal bones, the iliac region, joins onto your sacrum, and then of course in between your vertebrae they would be found. And the most movable type of joint that we have is what we call a cartilaginous joint or a diarthrosis. I will probably always call it a synovial joint, okay? And I just want to make sure you see those terms and you connect them together when you go to your textbook. So this is the joint that gives our body the most freedom and flexibility. We remember that when we looked at long bones, and all bones as a matter of fact, when they come together, they'll have a layer of articular cartilage over them, and that decreases friction, but there's a number of other parts that go with this kind of joint. So they're held together with some sort of capsule holding that spans the joint. There's synovial membrane inside, and so best examples are the shoulder, the hip, and the knee. Now the shoulder and the hip have a larger range of motion. The knee has more of a hinge range of motion. We'll look at all of those. So synovial joint, remember, is a joint that comes together. I'm going to go to, actually, I've got a generic picture over here. Okay. So this is just two bones coming together, demonstrating all of the characteristics or all of the qualities that you'd see in a synovial joint. So the two bones that articulate, right here and here, and remember that this is going to give us substantial freedom and range of motion. They're freely movable, or sometimes called diarthrotic joints, and all of our limb joints are this. So what are the distinguishing features? Well, there's articular cartilage. So here, wherever bones meet, okay, we're going to have articular cartilage. So that's the white you're seeing here. Think about the chicken bone and the white glassy end on it. A joint capsule, okay, a joint capsule. So we've talked about that. Okay, so that was number one we talked about. Number two, a joint capsule. Synovial fluid. We need synovial membrane, and that's everywhere where there is not articular cartilage, we'll have this synovial membrane that will make synovial fluid. And that's the lubrication that we need inside that joint. And then exteriorly, we'd have a number of reinforcing ligaments to help stabilize this joint. So we'll look at it a little more individually. So the articular cartilage again here, okay, and they always cover the opposing bone surfaces. This joint cavity, now it looks like a big space on that picture, but it's really what we call a potential space, where there really, if I went in there, you wouldn't see an open space. But fluid could make its way in there and collect. It is filled with synovial fluid, and that's released from the synovial membrane, and that again provides lubrication. The joint capsule is double layered. Outside is fibrous connective tissue, and inside is the synovial membrane. So this is the inside. It's kind of like a fabric that has two good sides to it, okay, or reversible fabric. Okay, and there's just another picture, gives you a different view of the same thing we just talked about. Now the structure, the synovial fluid that we find inside the joint is, you know, I guess it just reminds me, if I could describe it to you, it's like an egg white. When you crack an egg, a raw egg into a bowl, it's that kind of slippery consistency. And it fills up all of that potential space in there, so it's lubricating it nice. And the more you warm up before you do anything, the thinner it'll get and the better it'll cover the surface. The reinforcing ligaments strengthen, and there's quite a number of them, and it depends on what joint that you're in. So the shoulder has a larger amount maybe than other joints because it's a very shallow shoulder. Plus it has a strong set of muscles that support it, the rotator cuff muscles. So why do we have synovial fluid? Well, as I said, decreases friction, but it also brings nourishment to the cartilage there. And it does have phagocytic cells that help keep the joint free of debris or anything that might cause an infection. A joint infection is a very, very serious infection. And then the last slide here talks about bursa. So sometimes in different areas, we're going to find bursa. And you've heard of the term bursitis, okay? So what they are these little synovial membrane sacs that you'll find. They're like little pouches of synovial membrane that we find between the skin and some bony prominences. And they're an area where there's a lot more friction. So they act kind of like a ball bearing and help decrease that friction. So you've heard of housemaid's knee and tennis elbow and all of that. That's sometimes when there's repeated friction, the synovial membrane can't provide the support that it needs in those areas. So the opposite, I guess, of this not working well is bursitis. And we'll just find these little pads of synovial membrane in certain places throughout the body joint system.